And we're live. Hello, Rebels. Garrett Robinson here, independent author of the Realm Keepers series, the upcoming novel Rebel Yell, the Touch trilogy, non-zombie hit girls, the Ninja Bread Man, and currently the fantasy serialized adventure Nightblade. This is my show, VlogaNovel, where I live create a book for you guys on streaming video on my YouTube channel. Currently, the book in question is Nightblade Episode 3, which we're wrapping up the last portion of the creation process. But everything from outlining to writing the first draft, editing, formatting, and publication all takes place on live video for you guys to watch. If you're a writer, you may enjoy learning somebody else's process. And if you're a reader who enjoys the series, you might like all of the behind-the-scenes looks and finding out about how the things about the characters and the world and stuff that might not ever even necessarily make it into the books, but you'll know because you're a super fan. So this is the live reading slash audiobook recording of episode 3. And I did a half hour yesterday, and then I was supposed to have a very productive weekend in which I finished it and started episode 4, and that didn't happen. So, yeah. Anyway, fun. So we're wrapping up the audiobook recording now, and that's going to happen over the next couple of hours, and then I'm going to start episode 4. This week, I don't have morning classes. I'm not teaching this week, so I get so much extra time to work this week, which is fantastic. But let's kick into, a couple of things to know. You can purchase this book in the link in the blue section of the screen right below my face, garrettbrobinson.com/NB-3. That contains links to buy it everywhere. You can buy it direct from me, which I prefer. As an independent author, I get a much higher percentage of the royalties than if you buy it from Amazon or Kobo or anything like that. But if you're used to buying from those platforms and you want to do that, there's buttons to buy them there, to buy it there as well. And the best place to find out about new episodes of VlogaNovel is no longer on my website. I am not going to be posting these on my website anymore because my website is my blog, and it's not the wrong purpose. It's not. It's just weird having all the videos there because they clutter up my whole feed and everything. The best place to find out is to go to the new VlogaNovel channel, youtube.com/user/VlogaNovel, or I think youtube.com/VlogaNovel will just do it as well, and subscribe to that channel. Also, hang out on the Reddit, the subreddit VlogaNovel, because every episode does get posted there, and that's probably the best place to find out about all that sort of stuff. I will be posting when I start a new episode on my blog, and that will take you to a link for the playlist, but really you should subscribe to VlogaNovel. That's just the best place to get that. So let's get started. Need to work out my instrument. Meh. Now I am cloaked in shadow, thought Lauren, like Menet, but with blood on my hands. There, said Damaris, it fits as though I had cut it for you myself, and you can hide that needle at your waist again. Lauren's cheeks filled with red, and her hand leapt to the dagger. She had forgotten it utterly. Just at the corner of her vision, Lauren saw Gregor. The captain looked poised to leap at a moment's notice. He could not move fast enough, Lauren knew. She could draw the dagger and lay Damaris's throat open before Gregor could take his first step. But she would not. Nightblade does not murder. That was the only victory she could take from today, and she would not lose her grip upon it. After a moment of Lauren's stillness, Damaris relaxed. Her hand rose without warning, the backs of her fingers trailing against Lauren's cheek. Lauren looked into the merchant's eyes in wonder. That was a terrible line delivery. Lauren Lauren looked into the merchant's eyes in wonder. Steel still showed there, it was true, but Lauren saw something else, a keen affection, a softening just around the pupils that spoke of concern. "Do you think I enjoy what happened?" said Damaris. "You wrong me. One must do what one must do. You will see, if you spend much longer in this world. You will understand, and perhaps see me as wise instead of monstrous." If you spend much longer in this world, Lauren thought. She thought she might lose her gorge again, and pictured vomit splashing against her across her. She thought she might lose She felt she might lose her gorge again, and pictured vomit splashing across Damaris's pretty leather boots. Damaris gave her a final gentle pat on the cheek. "Do not trouble yourself overmuch with this. Let it flow over and through you, occupying your thoughts as it must, and then let it run away." She turned and went back to her horse, mounting and riding swiftly away. Lauren turned to the men behind her. The graves lay filled and blanketed with audio pop. The graves lay filled and blanketed with leaves. Lauren stared at the turned earth with dead eyes, and then she imagined the dead eyes that lay beneath it. She dropped her shovel and turned for the caravan. Her cloak of shadows rippled in her wake. Skadoosh. That's chapter 1 done. Huzzah. So we save. We export an AIFF file. We export an AIFF file. There we go. And then we export the individual tracks, each as their own file, which is what goes into the mix, the final mix. By the way, two things to know if you've never tuned in for one of these before. The first, there we go. The first is that basically, oh, poop, I didn't do that for that. That's not good. So hold on one second here, sorry. Just need to make sure I'm naming my shit right. What? 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 Okay. I think that's right. So the first thing to know is that if you are watching this on YouTube video, you're probably like, that audio quality sucks. I wouldn't buy an audiobook with that sound quality. That's because you're listening to the YouTube video, which whether on live streaming or rebroadcast later, has to go through all kinds of compression because it's going straight to the internet, blah, 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 blah. What you see there, the little waveforms on the screen and whatnot, that is a separate high quality audio recording, and then that's what I take into Pro Tools and mix for the final audiobook mix. So if you do get the audiobook, which feel free, It sounds considerably better. Uh, so that's one thing to know. And then, just because I am about to start another chapter, basically the book is written in serialized form, published in serialized form, but then it's also going to be compiled into volumes of 8 episodes. And in those volumes of 8 episodes, it is consistent. I'm not going to break the audiobook up into episodes and then chapters. And so when I do chapter 2, it's going to be chapter 2, but for the volume, it's going to be chapter 12. So you'll hear me say both of them, and that's why I'm doing that. Now I just need to make sure I'm not totally screwing everything up real quick. That is so funny. Whatever. Mips. Here we go, chapter 2. Begin! Chapter 2. Chapter 12. From that moment on, Lauren watched for an opportunity to escape, but Gregor hounded her like a shadow, never out of sight. It seemed that Damaris did not trust Lauren after all, despite her kind manner. Lauren's only solitude came when she went to the woods to make water. Then Gregor let her leave his sight. The first time, Lauren kept going into the woods, hoping to fade away and leave him behind. But she had only gone a few yards before she saw one of Gregor's guards between the trunks, eyes fixed upon her. They traveled south along the road the rest of the day, and Lauren's mind raced to determine what Damaris could want from her. She could think of nothing. Once they stopped for the night, Annis appeared as if from nowhere. Her manner seemed airy, light, unreal. Unpleasant, that Shit, how did Annis even talk? I totally don't remember. Oh, important things. Remembering how your characters talk. Hmm. That was terrible. Oh boy. Unpleasant, that business this morning, wouldn't you say? Lauren ignored the question. She tried to ignore Annis altogether. Still, we made good time, Annis went on. And at least you need not fear my mother turning you into the constables for a bounty. I think we have well moved. Stop recording. I think we have well moved beyond such distrust. Lauren looked over her shoulder. Gregor still stood nearby. He did not react to her look, keeping his stony eyes forward. What do you want? Lauren hissed. Want? Said Annis. Why, whatever do you mean? Leave me alone, said Lauren, putting as much venom in her tone as she could. I wish nothing to do with you. She stalked off into the night, looking for a place to lay her head. Mercifully, Annis let her go. At last Lauren found a spot on the open ground, with guards in plain sight but at a distance, and lay her head down upon a mound of dirt. It took her a long, long time to find sleep, and during the night she often It took her a long, long time to find sleep, and during the night she woke often at terrifying dreams of a sword in her chest. The next day turned bleak, with heavy gray clouds covering the sky above. Unusual weather for summer, thought Lauren. The thought came dead and hollow from a distant part of her mind. A forester's daughter should mind the change in weather, but this heartsick girl could not find it in herself to care. Annis left her alone as they traveled, but after another day's slow journey the girl appeared again. This time she simply sat by Lauren, without invitation or request, plopping down across the small fire Lauren had built. Lauren wanted to snap at her, to shout, to tell her to get away, but she dared not. What if Annis took insult? Would Damaris have Lauren killed and dragged off to the woods to join the constable in feeding the forest floor? So Lauren listened as Annis chattered nonsensically about this and that, and the roads she had traveled since leaving the High King's seat. Before long, Lauren wanted to shake the girl until her silly head came off. The evening wore on, and the evening wore on, and still Annis showed no signs of slowing in her speech. As the sun's last light faded on the horizon, and Lauren thought of sleep, Annis scooted closer and grasped her wrist with a smile. "Might you tell me another tale of Menet?" said Annis. "He sounded a wondrous man, and I'd wager you know more of him than just what you told me." Lauren hesitated. She had no wish to tell a story, but anything seemed preferable to listening to Annis's babbling. And mayhap a story of Menet would calm her mind. She felt ragged after a day of looking over her shoulder, wondering always if each moment might be her last. Lauren knew one thing above all else. She must escape, and the hell is that? Ah, there it is. Lauren knew one thing above all else. She must escape, and as soon as possible. Damaris must have something planned for her, and Lauren had no wish to learn of that plan. She would find some escape, and meanwhile she must bide her time. The fire had burned low. As she pushed up to her knees and found more wood for the flame, Lauren thought at last of a tale. "Shall I tell you of the time Menet bent iron with cloth?" said Lauren. Annis looked at her askance. "You must jest. Cloth cannot best iron." Lauren fanned the flames, watching as the orange glow painted Annis's chubby features. But best it he did. One day Menet found himself within a king's dungeon. The king knew of Menet's cloak of shadow, and thus he bade his jailer to line every inch of the wall with torches. Without darkness to hide within, Menet's escape seemed hopeless. Annis sat forward. "They trapped Menet?" "Trapped, yes, but not for long," said Lauren. "Menet had many years ahead of him as the greatest thief in the land, and he would not let a wizard king stay him." Perhaps Annis imagined it, but she thought a sharp breeze gusted. The tongues of flame danced for the moment. Both girls shuddered. "A wizard king?" said Annis, and her voice cracked. Yes, they still ruled in those days, many years and more before Andrian the Fearless outlawed them. Lauren reached into her bag to gather her supper. But how could Menet hope to stand against... But how could Menet hope to stand against a wizard king? Said Annis. They held a dark power, or so my tutors have taught me. They taught you well, but a dark power is nothing next to the power of darkness itself, said Lauren. And so they kept Menet bathed in light. He inspected every corner of his cell, but the iron bars held firm. He could find no loose stone or crumbling mortar to aid his escape. Annis remained perfectly quiet, only leaning back to wrap her arms around her knees. Lauren paused for a moment to let the words sink in before she went on. The Wizard King laughed to see Menet search so earnestly for a way out. At last Menet grew thirsty and begged a pitcher of water. The Wizard King... What was his name? Lauren frowned. Whose? The Wizard King. He was... Lauren thought hard, but not for the life of her could she remember. Bracken told me once, but I cannot recall it. Why didn't the Wizard King just kill Menet? Said Annis. Why hold him prisoner if he did not mean to kill him? And if he meant to kill him, why not do it at once? Lauren gave an exasperated snort. If he had killed him, how could he go on to become the most famed thief in all the land? Annis folded her arms, stubborn. Why would the Wizard King care about that? He should have killed him. I would have killed him. Lauren's voice cracked. She was 15 years old, and her voice was going through things. Hmm. Lauren saw Damaris standing there above the corpses by the wagons. Fear formed like a white-hot stone in her gut. Yes, Annis might have killed Menet. The apple rarely fell far away from the roots of its tree. She pressed on. The Wizard King granted Menet's request. His guards fetched a pitcher of water and a wooden cup to drink with. Menet drank deep gulps of the water and then curled... Excuse me. Menet drank a deep gulp of the water and then curled up in the corner of his cell, wrapping his arms around himself as though taken by a chill. The Wizard King soon left, bored by his new plaything. Once he was alone, Menet rose silently. He pulled the tunic from his back and tied it around two of the iron bars that held him in the cell. Then he took one of his boots, made from hard leather, and pushed it through the tunic. He seized both sides of the boot and twisted as hard as he could. Round and round he turned the boot, until the tunic strained at the iron bars. The fabric stretched, but did not break. Finally the iron bars bent under the strain, just enough for Menet to slip through. He donned his tunic again and slipped out the door. Annis sat dumbfounded. Can cloth truly bend iron this way? Would I lie to you? Said Lauren, a small smile playing across her lips. Yes, yes, I would, and I have. In truth, Menet had wet the tunic, and the water had given the... Now, you know what? She felt no obligation to tell Annis everything. Let the girl feel the frustration of hearing a bad tale. Annis shook her head. No, I cannot believe it. Else how could any prison hold its prisoners? Lauren shrugged. Believe it or not, as you will, I tell only an old tale. What value has an old tale without a kernel of the truth? What else are stories for? Annis folded her arms and began to pout. Lauren had tired of her little voice cracking. Is what she tired of. Tell you what. Lauren had tired of her little performance. I am sorry to have disappointed you, but now I must away. I have had much water as I walked, and it begs leave of my company. I shall accompany you, said Annis, leaping to her feet. You? Said Lauren. What happened to refined society where we must hide our bodies away? Annis shrugged. It grows dark. If you object, we may take turns. Lauren grimaced, but she could do nothing. Together they tramped toward the trees, Gregor shadowing their footsteps. Once they had passed between the first two trunks, Annis turned to look at the captain. You approach far enough, she said. Gregor did not blink. Your lady mother commands me, Annis, not you. And what will my mother think if I tell her that you leered at me like an old lecher when I went to relieve myself? Gregor did not reply or move a muscle, but when Annis turned and walked on, he followed a bit farther back. When they stopped, he fell back and out of sight. But he did not fool Lauren. But he did not fool Lauren. She knew Gregor's men lurked all around them. She gave a grumbling sigh and prepared to do her business. We must speak, and quickly, hissed Annis. And for the love of decency, do not do that while I stand here. The urgent tone of her voice drew Lauren's attention. What? Said Lauren. What of? You are in danger as long as you stay here, said Annis. Lauren snorted a grim laugh. You bring me no news. Your mother seems to see little value in any life, much less my own. Annis's eyes stayed solid. I believe my mother keeps you here as a distraction. For what? I have heard her speak with Gretchen in the carriage. If questioned, my mother will tell the city guard that yesterday's constable pursued... If questioned, my mother will tell the city guard that yesterday's constable pursued you north along the road, but if that should fail, they will likely search our wagons. Then my mother will change her tune. I think she means to trade you in exchange for safe passage into the city. Lauren swallowed hard. It hurt her throat. Why tell me? Do you think I resemble my mother? Whispered Annis, glaring at her. She has fed many men to the underworld ever since I was a babe. I was raised to think it normal. Then one day I realized the truth, that murder was wrong and outside of the king's law, and that my mother only escaped justice thanks to the depth of our coffers. I have sought escape from her ever since. Lauren could say nothing to that. She knew something of the desperation to escape home and the parents who lived there. Annis looked into her eyes, and she must have seen something there that encouraged her. A stern, set expression crossed her features, and again she spoke in a whisper. Will you do it, then? If I help you escape, will you take me with you? Lauren nodded. I will. I swear it. All right. I'm pleased with this. Sploosh. Oh, God. A new one, and close the old one, and chapter 3, here we come. Come. Good. Chapter 3. Chapter 13. As they traveled on the next morning, Damaris emerged from her carriage. "Lauren!" As soon as she heard the merchant's high voice, Lauren's heart leapt into her throat. She pictured Annis's face glowing blue in the moonlight. Had it all been a ruse? Perhaps Annis had told her mother everything, and now Damaris summoned Lauren for judgment. But no, they could have done that last night. Gregor could have ended her in an instant, at any time in the night. While Lauren still lived, she must keep hope, so she quickened her pace to join Damaris. Today the merchant wore a gown of light green. It hung slimmer than her average garb, though that by no means rendered it plain. Elegant designs like spider webs wound up and down its length, some in gold thread and some in light pink, interlocking with each other to create a varied palette of color. Damaris's hair clung to the top of her head in tight braids, worked into a wide bun. But the merchant's beauty no longer impressed Lauren, for she had seen what lay beneath it. Only a fool saw a bear trap wrapped in velvet and still desired to run their hand along it. As Lauren came to her, Damaris took the edge of the black cloak in her fingers. She ran her fingers along its trim, an eerie smile playing on her lips. "It suits you very well," said Damaris. "Do you enjoy it?" Lauren chose her words carefully. "I have often dreamed of a cloak just like it," she said. That was true enough. In Lauren's dreams, Nightblade always wore a cloak of fine black cloth. "It will serve well for riding as well as foot travel," said Damaris. "Gregor, bring my horse." That took Lauren aback. What did Damaris play at? She mocked Lauren for objecting to the constable's death, then caressed her and gave her a fine cloak. She put Lauren under guard like a common criminal, then continued her riding lessons? "My lady is too kind," said Lauren, hoping the sarcasm came through. That did not sound sarcastic at all. "My lady is too kind," said Lauren, hoping the sarcasm came through in her voice. But Damaris only nodded and stepped aside. This time Lauren mounted more easily and sat loose, hands firm on the saddle horn. Gregor mounted his own steed, then came forward to take the reins from his lady. Thus we rocked. Thus we walked down the road together, as pretty a picture as one could imagine, thought Lauren. The captain, the merchant, and the forester's daughter. It sounded like the name of a song, but Lauren could not smile at the thought. Even being on horseback again could not improve her mood. Damaris had poisoned that dream. "That dagger at your belt," said Damaris. "A fine make, is it not? Gregor, you know of such things." Gregor did not bother glancing at it. "A fine make indeed, my lady." "I confess my curiosity as to how you came by it," said Damaris. "An heirloom, perhaps, passed down from nobler days of your family?" Lauren shrugged. "I see only a knife, my lady." "Oh, no," said Damaris. "No, not only that. To the wise and trained eye, that dagger holds more words than a tome. It speaks of breeding, of artistry. If I did not know better, I would say you had taken it from a corpse. She gave Lauren a sharp glance at that. But, of course, we have seen how abhorrent you find such things. It came from my parents, said Lauren, her voice cool, nonchalant. Where they came by it, I never knew, but when I left home, it passed into my hands. I made a promise to use it honorably. She put a small bite in the last word, hoping to anger Damaris with the dig, but if the merchant noticed, she gave no sign. Curiouser and curiouser, said Damaris. And how came simple foresters by such a fine thing? Perhaps my guess of grave robbery falls near the mark, though it may not have been you who did the robbing. Now came Lauren's turn to feel the bite of words well chosen. Her cheeks flushed, and she found herself surprised at her anger. Ugh. Her cheeks flushed, and she found herself surprised at her anger. What did she care for insults? For insults. For insults. For insults. What did she care for insults delivered to her parents? She had thought much worse than that in 15 years. Oh, do not take offense, said Damaris, tossing her hair. I jest, and even if your parents acquired the dagger through less than savory means, what of it? I do not know the tale of how my forebears came by their wealth, but I doubt it is free of darker chapters. Is that why you act the way you do, my lady? Said Lauren. Are you only following in the footsteps of your ancestors? Do any of us do any different? I will never be like my parents. So have all children said throughout history, but if they only considered things clearly, they might not see their parents as such villains after all. Take Annis, for example. She does not approve of many things I do to ensure her safety. Did she tell you? Lauren... Lauren felt suddenly glad for years of experience lying to her parents. Not a muscle in her face twitched. No, she seemed quite cheerful, in fact, after what happened. A farce she puts on to hide her disgust, I fear, said Damaris. Yet I would go to any length for her future, to depths twice as dark as you can imagine. You did it to... You did it to protect her, then? Would the constable have killed a little girl if he found your cargo? Lauren could not quite keep the bitterness from her voice. Damaris shrugged. Lauren had the urge to kick her. They would have spared her, but safety means more than survival. True safety lies only in plenty, and sometimes not even then. Do you know how long the 9 Kingdoms have had a High King? Lauren frowned at the unexpected change in topic. She thought hard. 2000s of years? Said Lauren. 1200s, said Damaris, and the kingdoms have changed mightily in that time. The men who laid the rules of election and first drew our borders would not recognize the lands you and I walk today. 9 royal families there are, but none of those families existed when the first High King took his seat. But do you know how long my family has dealt in our unique brand of goods? Lauren did not wish to seem foolish by answering wrong, so she remained silent. 2600s of years, said Damaris. We claim to be the oldest family in the 9 Kingdoms. Vast is our wealth and extensive our power. Kings claim the right to rule, but their right has only ever come from coin that my family and others coin that my family and others like ours control. Even as a lesser scion of my house, I may yet have the ear of any man in the 9 kingdoms, save only the High King himself, if I so desire." Lauren's body had grown tense. She forced herself to relax and move with the horse again. What manner of people had she fallen in with? "Do you know that there has never been a merchants' war?" said Damaris, again shifting subjects as swiftly as the wind. "Neither in name nor in practice. Wars are brutal, messy things, far below our station, and yet men insist upon fighting them. We are only too happy to lend them the coin to do so, but while we do not go to war, that does not mean we have forgotten the benefit of a swift killing. What death we deal occurs in darkness and silence, the bodies quickly buried and even more quickly forgotten. Many know of it, none acknowledge it. As long as it remains well out of sight, most would sooner ignore it. Thus it has always been, and thus it will always be. Do you understand?" Lauren could not begin to understand, but she nodded quickly atop the horse. "I do, my lady." "I doubt it. But one day you might." Lauren knew it would be better to still her tongue, but she could not avoid one question. "My lady, why do you tell me all this?" "Because," said Damaris, "I see precious things in your eyes, child, so much fear and anger, and yet so much wonder. You have suffered so much, and yet you still believe the world can hold something other than suffering. Who has not felt the same? Girls such as yourself are like pure white eagles found in the woods, rarer than elves and twice as sacred, treasures we must preserve at all costs." The flowery words floated in Lord The flowery words floated in Lauren's mind like a dream. She remembered Annis's words the night before, and tried to come to her senses. Damaris sought to flatter her so they could deceive her more easily. She would not fall prey to such a simple scheme. And as she thought on them, Damaris's words touched off a thought in Lauren's mind. Damaris clucked her tongue. "Come, try Come, try trotting again." Gregor spurred his horse and tugged on the reins of Lauren's, and both beasts erupted into sudden motion. They trotted off together, Lauren clinging to the horse's neck and glancing ever to the Fürstner. They trotted off together, Lauren clinging to the horse's neck and glancing every so often at Gregor's sword hanging at his belt. That is the truth of this world, she thought. Not flowery words, but a large man with a sword on his belt. Go. Oh. Do 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 do. Only 11 tracks to record that. That's not too bad. Oh, man. Whoops. Oh, well. Chapter 4. Here we go. Almost. 15 minutes left. I'll probably get about halfway through this chapter. Maybe. Or maybe finish it. You never know. Chapter 4. Chapter 14. The last day dawned, the day upon which they would reach the walls of Cabris. Lauren woke earlier than normal, when the sky held only a faint gray with no trace of pink. She looked up, and, for once, she did not see Gregor standing nearby. The giant did sleep, then. She rose and took a hesitant step away from the caravan. A guard melted from the darkness to watch her. She could not shake a persistent feeling between excitement and apprehension. She could not shake a persistent feeling between excitement and apprehension. Today her journey with the caravan would end in one of three ways. She would escape, the constables would take her prisoner, or someone would kill her. Kill me. The thought that she might die today did not cause her nearly as much worry as she thought it might. After witnessing 8 men die, death suddenly seemed commonplace, a trite thing, something almost too often done. Gregor appeared, and the other guard vanished into the diminishing darkness. Soon after that, Annis came out from her carriage. She stretched and yawned noisily in the early morning light, her eyes lighting up as they fell upon Lauren. "Good morn," said Annis. "We reach Cabris today." "So I have been told," said Lauren. She had decided the day before that she must maintain an air of sullen silence and resentment around Annis. Gregor must not suspect the girls of plotting together. Annis, for her part, seemed to understand, for she wore the same chipper, vacant smile that she had worn the day the constable's men had died. "Come," said Annis, "let us visit the woods before we set off. You may not see them again for a while, I fear, and you have spent your whole life among trees." "I suppose," said Lauren. She laid her water-skin in her travel sack and slung it over her shoulder. The sack now bulged with fresh provisions. The sack now bulged with fresh provisions. Fresh provisions. Try and say that without sounding drunk. The sack now bulged with fresh provisions. The sack now bulged with fresh provisions, ready to flee. The water-skin sloshed full and noisy, refilled from the caravan's stores. Annis kept up her chatter as they came under the boughs of the trees, pink light bathing her upturned face and somewhat squashed nose. After they had gone on for a time, she turned to Gregor. "I need my privacy." Gregor nodded slowly and gestured at Lauren. "Very well. Come with me, girl." "Not from her," said Annis. "We are maidens both. Besides, dawn rises. She must need to relieve herself." Lauren shrugged, giving Gregor a dead-eyed stare. I suppose. Gregor backed off, looking none too pleased. As soon as he had gone, Annis pretended to squat. Lauren joined her. "Our time runs short," said Annis, her voice a low whisper. "Today we must escape." "I have an idea," said Lauren. Annis blinked at her in surprise. Annis blinked at her in surprise. "Truly? Tell me." "If I can distract Gregor and his men, do you think you can acquire one of your mother's brown cloth packages?" Annis blanched. "Perhaps, but why?" "Damaris told me that the world runs smoothly as long as no one must face the deeds of her and her kind. I plan to turn things rough." Annis shook her head. "If I am caught—" "I can provide ample distraction," said Lauren. "Can you do it?" "I can." Annis did not sound pleased. "Good. Come, then. Let us return, for we must act before the caravan moves on." They made their way back. In only a moment they spotted Gregor through the trees. He watched them with an expression that Lauren could not read, but he said nothing, only following silently. Once they neared the road again, Annis bid Lauren farewell and headed off on some pretense of preparing her carriage. That left Lauren and Gregor alone. Lauren increased her pace, making for the third caravan from the end, the only one that she knew for certain contained the packages of brown cloth. "Where are you going?" said Gregor. "Oh, nowhere of consequence," said Lauren. "Tell me, when did you learn swordsmanship?" Gregor did not answer. "Come now, surely no harm can come from my knowing. Were you as old as me? Younger? Older?" Gregor sniffed. "Younger." "Younger. I began my training as a boy of 10 summers." "10?" said Lauren, allowing a look of shock to spread across her face. "Then you have the advantage. I greatly desire to learn how to protect myself. Could you teach me?" Gregor did not answer. Lauren spotted a guard near the wagon, standing near its head. She made for him quickly, her pace just below a run. "If I wish to catch up, I must begin immediately. Do you think you can teach me what you know today, before we reach the— Do you— on the wrong hole? That's what she said. "Do you think you can teach me what you know today, before we reach the walls of the city?" "I trained for years," said Gregor, and now Lauren could hear an undercurrent of exasperation. "I fear I have no years to waste on such an endeavor," said Lauren. "We must speed the process." The guard noticed them at last, looking up in confusion. Without warning, Lauren sprang forward and dragged his sword from its scabbard. The man shouted in alarm, but Lauren danced away on the balls of her feet. The sword felt much, much heavier than she had expected. "How do you manage such a thing?" she said. "I can scarcely lift the thing." "I can scarcely lift the blade." "Drop it," said Gregor. His hand shot to his own sword, and his face drew together in a scowl. The guard came after her, arms outstretched, but Lauren turned and ran a few steps more. "I mean no harm. I only wish to learn," said Lauren. She must not appear a threat. She had no desire to end this day on the end of Gregor's sword. She danced down the line of wagons, waving the sword around in the air in what she hoped passed for an imitation of a real sword fighter. Come, teach me the intricacies of parry and thrust, the elegant dance of death. She let her feet tangle beneath her, and she crashed to the ground, careful not to land on the blade. The guard leapt forward, but Lauren shot to her feet and just out of his reach. It was a dance, she realized, though her partner seemed unwilling. She took a fighter's pose, one arm behind her and the sword held forward. Now, how does one manage the thrust? She said. She tried it, and the guard cried out as he fell back. He stumbled over his heels, barely managing to keep his footing. "If you do not drop that weapon," said Gregor. "You will take it from me?" said Lauren. "I welcome it. Come, teach me the way they taught you as a boy." All the while her voice played at a high, strident pitch. Guards all up and down the line of wagons came closer, drawn by the commotion. She saw many of them smiling, amused by her ungainly swings. Best of all, Gregor still did not draw his steel. No one could see a danger in her wild flailing. The guard came forward once again, and Lauren fled again. She drew him further away from the wagon near the end of the line. Now no one stood close by. A flash of purple told her that Annis had gained the wagon. She drew him further away from the wagon near the end of the line. Now no one stood close by. A flash of purple told her that Annis had gained the wagon. "Come, Sir Lord Captain, Commander, King, teach me. You will not find a more willing student," cried Lauren. She faced off against Gregor from 10 yards away and swung the sword in 2 interlocking circles. "Meet me with a riposte, if you can, or whatever it is that you call it." She glanced over her shoulder to see if any guards approached from behind, and was surprised to find Damaris. The merchant stood near her carriage at the head of the line, her eyes fixed intently on Lauren. As Lauren watched, Damaris's face broke in a small smile. "Your lady laughs at you," said Lauren. "You should defend your honor." The other guard lunged at her again, and she spun out of the way at the last second. The movement nearly made her drop the sword, but she rescued it at the last moment. The movement nearly made her drop the sword, but she rescued it before it fell. But at last she had chosen her words unwisely. She heard the sharp hiss of a drawn sword, and turned to see Gregor's in his fist. Steeling her nerves, she smiled at him. "At last! Do you mean to teach me, master?" She leapt aside to avoid another attempt by the guard to recover his weapon. Her foot lashed out to entangle his, sending him crashing to the dirt. "I warn you, I will not go easy on you." Gregor advanced upon her with measured, resolute steps. "I have warned you. Your fool's tongue will not spare you." In his glare she saw hate and fury, the first true emotions she had In his glare she saw hate and fury, the first true emotions she had seen in him since first she arrived at the caravan. But over his... No, still not happy with that at all. In his glare she saw hate and fury, the first true emotions she had seen in him since first she arrived at the caravan. But over his shoulder she saw another flash of purple cloth with gold brocade, this time moving away from the wagon. Lauren had done her job. She dropped the sword, and it sank point first into the ground. "Very well," she said hastily. "If you do not mean to teach me, I shall press upon you no further." Gregor did not answer, nor did he stop. Lauren scarcely had time to think, "He truly means to kill me," before the air whistled with the passage of his sword. She dropped to the ground and rolled away as it passed through the air where her head had been. "Gregor!" Damaris's sharp voice cracked out like a whip. Gregor froze as he stood above her, and his eyes snapped to his lady. 3 deep breaths he took, while Lauren waited on her belly. "She makes you look a fool, and you allow it to anger you," said Damaris. "Do you act upon the whim of a girl not yet come to womanhood?" "I have too," thought Lauren, knowing that to voice the words could mean death. Gregor whirled his sword in the air and returned it to its scabbard in one quick motion. He bowed to Damaris, his face once again an emotionless mask. "Of course not, my lady. I only acted because I thought her a threat." "This one? A threat?" Damaris scoffed. "Return to your duties, all of you." The other guards drifted away and back to their posts, and Lauren heard more than a few chuckle as they went. Her eyes rose to meet Gregor's. She could not mistake the fire that burned within him. Lauren knew that she could no longer consider herself safe around him. But with any luck, Lauren need not worry about him after today. "Thank you for the lesson, master," she said softly. Gregor turned and stalked away without a word. Lauren rose and went to find Annis. Okay, so the hour ran out during that time, so I am going to take a quick break. And then I will be back to wrap up the audiobook recording, and then we're done with episode 3. Okay, so that's going to be it for this episode of VlogaNovel. Thank you very much if you tuned in and watched live, or if you're watching it at some distant point in the future. It is my pleasure to write live for you and to read live for you, etc., etc. Again, you can purchase this book if you so desire, and I certainly hope you do, at the link in the blue section of the screen below my face, garrettbrobinson.com/nb-3. That contains links to purchase it on all platforms, direct from me, on your Kindle, on your Kobo, Nook, iBooks, everything. Excuse me. And I will be back very shortly to wrap up the audiobook recording for this. If you haven't read anything in this series, you want to start with the first book, which is down the bottom link in the blue section of the screen, garrettbrobinson.com/nb-1. I'll be back very soon with more VlogaNovel. Thanks a lot. Bye.